First, we add into the panel, please welcome Wyoming Tyus, Olympics 1964 and beyond, 1968. Next, we're very pleased to invite to the stage the great Celtics champion, world champion, 8 NBA championships. Please welcome Satch Sanders from the Celtics. We also have again Professor Shropshire, who's with us, the author of more than 20 books for children and adults, done an incredible amount on everything from Dr. King to every other conceivable issue, including the great golf course. Please welcome Rich Michelson. John Carlos is seated and ready to go. The next panelist is the Director of Development and Scholarship Programs at Marquette, has written extensively, has been very active as well. What I didn't mention, he was a star linebacker at East Carolina and then played for 8 years with the Green Bay Packers, including the 1996 Super Bowl year with the Packers, and continues to do important work in sports. Please welcome Dr. George Kuntz. Five-time boxing champion, ranked 5th in steals and 7th in scoring at American University in all-time women's basketball, a great boxer, a great judge, a great lawyer, a great woman, and we're very happy to have her here. Please welcome Judge Jackie Frazier-Lai. And rejoin us, of course, is the inimitable, great Dr. Harry Edwards. And I want to start this one, if I can, with Satch Sanders. I want to go back and then forward. We've got a lot of interesting history. And I think you were on the team with Bill Russell, Dr. Sanders, when the still days of discrimination. People talk about the great athletes, the great wins. I think it was Kansas City, but something where they were separating blacks athletes on the team, etc. The question is, how much did race play a factor in sports for you as a professional athlete? And the second and related question, how in the world could you live in Massachusetts? I live there too. Be careful now.
You know, it's interesting questions. I will talk about the race as a factor for me in terms of sport. And thinking in terms of what it did, race was a factor for me, for example, in working relatively hard to achieve certain levels. But it was a little different racial issue. Growing up, I was not, I know you ladies and gentlemen are going to find this very difficult to believe, I was not considered very attractive by women. I know, you say it's impossible, I understand. But what occurred was, playing in high school, I looked around and the young ladies, cheerleaders and people were appreciating the good-looking guys. White, black, brown, whatever. But I could not get any attention. And at that time, I decided to really begin to take care of business and hurt all of the people, all of the guys that looked a little better than I did, okay, that the women liked. So that was a big factor. Now, I don't know whether that's race, okay, but it definitely crossed a lot of lines. Racial issues for us as Celtics. In Lexington, Kentucky, I believe it was, we were playing an exhibition game against the St. Louis Hawks, and what occurred was we went downstairs to eat in the hotel and could not be served. And what occurred there, Bill Russell, our leader, player on the court and off the court, said, well, if they won't feed us, we won't play. And we followed his lead, and we decided to leave. The team, of course, played on. They were celebrating a player, Frank Ramsey. That was where he went to school, et cetera, but we departed. Now, at that particular time, there were many instances of running into places where you could play, places where you couldn't eat, and all those kind of things. We're talking about, when I arrived at the Celtics, we're talking about the 60s, and it was an interesting time. When people talk about Massachusetts, and particularly Boston, that was certainly not the only place in America where there were some problems. We're talking about America, period. And our worst situations and experiences were in Los Angeles, okay, with the police. So across the board, racism in America was very alive then, and clearly it's still alive.
Let me ask you one further question in the context of that. People look at Boston, they remember the school busing in the 1970s, et cetera. Being in Massachusetts area now, I mean, people are happy with the 17 titles and things like that that the Celtics have achieved. How is the city different? We talk about race. How is it different in terms of your sense about tolerance and acceptance in the 21st century compared to when you were playing more than 50 years ago?
You know, more than 50 years ago.
You were young then.
I sort of reached out and grabbed me just then. Yeah. You know, everyone and everything seemed to grow. In Boston, like any other urban community, has grown. The acceptance that people tend to look at where blacks are concerned, and particularly athletes, we've gotten sort of past the stage where the Boston desegregation thing has frightened so many athletes away from Boston. And as you can see with certainly the present Celtics and other free agents in sports, they're not afraid to take a look at the Boston teams and think in terms of possibly coming if there's an opportunity. It doesn't mean that everything is free and clear and wonderful. It does mean that there's growth and certainly serious steps in the right direction. And the Celtics team really is the obvious example as far as I'm concerned.
Let me ask also, Wyoming, Tyus, in your career in sports and winning the gold medals and working in the Olympics, again, there were other people, you know, we talk about Jesse Owens in 1936, but there weren't a whole lot of professional black women in track when you were running as a teenager and then in the Olympics. What was the burden you had to deal with as not just a woman, but a black woman? Bill Rhoden has written about that black women were treated differently and sometimes worse. What was your experience in those tracks, in those places in the 60s, running for the United States?
Well, first of all, I grew up in Georgia, Griffin, Georgia, which is a very small town right outside of Atlanta, about 40 miles south of Atlanta. So my experience started very young. I grew up on a dairy farm, and when my playmates were my brothers and all their white friends, because where we lived, it was just a white neighborhood, and my dad worked a farm, and that's where we lived. So it started there, and as I grew older, my father would always say that he wanted us to always be better than him, have much more than he did. He wanted us to go to school. He never wanted us to pick cotton a day in our lives because he picked enough for everybody. So that's how it started out. And then when I started running track, it was more that this is something for me to do. This is something to keep me out of trouble. That's how my parents looked at it. And then the coach at Tennessee State, Coach at Temple, saw me compete in a track meet when I was about 15 and thought I had some potential there. And he invited me to come and work. He had a summer program where he trained junior high and high school kids, women, I should say. So he invited me to come for a summer, and that's what I did. And not knowing what it was going to lead to. And I just want to kind of add some stuff in about the Tiger Bells, Tennessee State Tiger Bells, because I don't think enough have ever been said or ever will be said about this courageous man that did so much for women and long before Title IX. He would go to the girls' houses and talk to their parents and invite and tell them, this is what I want from your daughter. These are my rules. If they follow them, then we'll be okay. So all that to say that when I went to Tennessee State and we would go on a trip and we would go in station wagons, and there were times we could not stop in towns because we couldn't use the bathroom. So we would stop in a field, and Coach Temple would say, okay, get out and hit it. And we would run out to the, and we would go out to the fields, and we would come back, and we'd keep on a trip, because there were places we just could not stop. So that started, I knew about that a long time ago. It was more that, okay, this is how life is going to be for us. And this is, it's not always going to have to be that way, but that's how it was. So not so much you get accustomed to it, you know that there are certain places you shouldn't go, and certain places you didn't want to go. My parents used to say, you don't want to go in a place that somebody don't want to feed you. You don't know what they're going to be putting in your food anyway. So this is how it started out. So it was hard, but it wasn't hard. We knew that was how life was. This is how people treated you, but you never let that get you down, because my parents always believed that you had to do the best that you could do at all times, no matter what the circumstances were. And that's what we did. I did that, and then I was thrown into the situation with Coach Ed Temple, where he taught the same thing. You know, he used to tell us all the time, you will go to the Olympics. If you go to the Olympics, you can win 20 gold medals. And guess what? You come back to America and they still won't know who you are and won't care who you are. Who you have to believe is in yourself. And not only believing in yourself, the medals are not going to make you. Now, Coach Temple, of all his young women that were at Tennessee State, every last one of them got an education. Every one of them graduated from college. All of them got degrees. And I mean, that's something that's to be said. I mean, you think about it, and we don't hear a lot about women, but we're talking now and talking about Title IX and all that. But here's a man when that was not even, when no one ever thought about it. Every woman that on his track team, over 40 women got their college education. And some of them not only just regular degrees, masters and doctors. And he's also a person that this women's team won 19 gold medals. 19 gold medals. And I think it's 14 silver and 3 bronze, or 4 bronze or something like that. He had a reign from the 50s through the 80s. And so with all of that, and all of those kinds of things, and then still not being put so much on the victory stand of saying, hey, you want a gold medal, we're going to do this for the school, we're going to do this for you young women who've done so much for our country. It didn't come that way. We didn't get it. We didn't know about it. We went on, got our education, because he would always say, they can't take that from you. You will always be able to have that education. You will always be able to do what you want to do as long as you have your education. You got to work hard. It's not going to be easy. Nobody's going to put it there to you. Nobody's going to put it on a silver platter. You're going to always have to, you're probably going to always struggle. And that's how I look at it. Life is a struggle, but I think I'm bigger than the struggle.
Thank you. I want to go to Judge Jackie Frazier-Lyde and say a bit. We saw in the footage, and we know the amazing history of your father with the 3 bouts against Ali. But as a child, he was looking and focusing on your going on to get an education. And you got one, working in many different ways. An athlete and a student at American University, an athlete and then a student to get your law degree. And now a judge in Philadelphia. So what do you tell people about your dad? I mean, how you got to where you are and how you avoided all the challenges. And you were a lawyer, judge, and a boxer, and basketball player. So you kept the sports, but you also really wanted to focus on succeeding as you could as a wonderful, and as you are a wonderful judge. What is it that motivated you from the parents' point of view? What do you remember about Dad?
I thank you. I just wanted to say peace and blessings. I'm really privileged to be here. Of all the things that you just stated, I'm now author, thanks to you, Professor Ogletree. I put together this tribute to boxing, my father, boxing icon Joe Frazier. And I would say that I'm part of why I'm here is because my father was just a really, really good parent. He was a good parent. And being taught, I think in our neighborhoods, that's what we need to do more of. We need to really be about teaching our children. They're being educated, but they're being shown the wrong things. They're learning the wrong things. So I thank you for the opportunity to be here. My father, if you want to know anything about me and my father, I put this piece together because I did it in about 3 or 4 days. But basically his thing, the motto of the Joe Frazier's Gym, which for 40 years Joe Frazier had a gym in Philadelphia on Broad Street. And his efforts were to teach children. He really was a teacher. And he wanted young men to know how to be men, as Brother Carlos mentioned. He wanted to show them, and he was very hands-on. It's really strange to be sitting here as a boxing champion because for my whole life with my father and him having that gym, I never ever touched the heavy bag. I never touched the speed bag. When I went to Joe Frazier's gym to visit my father, it was like, just go, don't stop, walk, say hello, and go right to the office, because he was basically a man who, you know, a woman's place is a woman's place. Like, the women are over here and the men over here. That's how he was brought up. So for me, it was a lot of challenge. My father and I, we had some really, how should I put it, very like conflicting conversations because I was more like his motto, which the Joe Frazier's gym motto was, no excuses, get the job done. So the piece, as far as, you know, that I wrote, it really talks very detailed about my life with my father. And I think mostly as a Christian student athlete, it really just allowed me to have so many different opportunities to be engaged with people. Having my father, Joe Frazier, as a celebrity, as a boxing icon, and I would also say, being from South Carolina, he was very personable. You know, he was very endearing, you know, and it was a situation where, as I greet people, it's South Carolina way. We love, we show love, and I think that was the biggest influence was growing up where people knew Joe. It was like, hey Joe, hey Joe. I remember a time when we were in New York, and it was suggested, oh, get a cab, and my father basically said, no, I'm gonna walk. Because he liked being with the people. He didn't want to take the cab because he liked people saying, hey champ, and you know, basically all that. So I would say that the seriousness of my father, the sensitivity that he had, I am trying to do everything I can to move in the legacy of continuing to teach our children. As a judge, I've been a judge for 4 years in the Philadelphia Municipal Court. Is the first judicial district of Pennsylvania. I have the privilege of being there and seeing how our court system is really not really, I think, doing the most that it can do. I like to see the courts be more about facilitating people's constitutional rights, and the oath that I've taken is to uphold, serve, and protect the Constitution of the United States and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and I'm specifically doing things through a mentoring program. It's a judicial internship mentoring program where I am recruiting like a gang member. My father would always say, oh, there's a bunch of gangs you have. You know, the gang of people in the music industry, you have the bankers gangs, you've got, you know, the gang of athletes, you know, there's always these different kind of gangs. I understand that there's a connotation of it being a negative term. But I would say that that's one of the things that I'm really most proud of. I take young people who are starting at the age of 12, and the objective and the endeavor is to make it where they have exposure, that they can learn what's going on in the neighborhood to minimize their chances of being a victim or being a defendant, as well as helping them to learn from a career opportunity perspective, and then also networking. So getting back to the part about, oh, you know, my father getting out of the cab and, you know, just meeting people, I believe that connections are really key. And so I put together another program that I think I shared with you called Community Connectivity Court, because I believe if we have the solution, then we definitely are, if we're the problem, then we're the solution. So just bring people in and connect them there. We have a lot of people with expertise in domestic violence and gangs and the sort. So for me, I would say sports, my father, my mother. I've had a lot of privilege as a result of my father being a celebrity, as a result of God using him and giving him so much talent as a little guy, because he was only about 5'11", but I really look at him as a real supernatural spirit who, because of sports, was allowed to have a platform of really demonstrating brotherly love and drawing people too close to humanity, and that's what his legacy that I'm moving in. And what's interesting about sports to me is that you can when you can practice, and start making the basket, because basketball was where I went to American U on a 4-year athletic scholarship, and then you start seeing how you can do things. As someone in the court who I did not intend to be a judge, it was a situation where my husband and one of my mentors, who happens to be Lydia White Kirkland, who is a retired judge now, she just retired last year, so I had the opportunity to serve on the same bench with a judge who I used to be a law clerk for. But what I was going to say about sports allows you to see that you can do it. That if you just, as brother, the Olympian brother Skeeter mentioned, it shows you that if you just keep staying on the course, if you practice, that you can make it. And I know that in society, I'm happy to be a part of this forum, because as we look at this, all the problems that exist, I think that we are well on our way, and I'm very optimistic that we will accomplish the humanity that God really wanted for all his children, to really truly be about living life to the fullest, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, as based on the Declaration of Independence.
All right, thank you. Good time. Let me ask George Koontz, in terms of your interest in sports and the race angle. You've written a remarkable piece about it this past year. What's your sense about, you heard Dr. Harry Edwards talk a little bit about 21st century. Are we in a better position to address some of the issues that are part of the downfall of sports now than we have been before? Because I'm hearing Wyoming Tices, I'm hearing Jackie Fraser-Leitner about a father, and I'm hearing Saxanders about the past. But what can we say about now in the future?
Well, I think the future looks pretty grim for us. Growing up in North Carolina, in a very socially, economically deprived area, I thought the only way I can get out was football. I did have some athletic prowess. My mom kind of pushed me towards football, but education was very, very important. And I was very, very fortunate to go to East Carolina and play football, and played in the National Football League for 9 years. But one of the things that's very, very disturbing to me is the statistics of my peers. 3 years removed, 24 months from their last game, they're unemployed, broke, divorced, or all three. The average lifespan of an NFL player is 57 years old. Starting in September, we're going to have about, the NFL makes up about 1,800 players. 70% of them are black. They're going to be taking home about $4.5 billion. But the sad thing is that, 24 months later, they're going to be broke. And they're going back to those neighborhoods in which they won't have a chance to make it a better place than what it was when they left. I think if the NFL don't step in and really put some things in place, some programs in place, to change the way things are going right now, I think we have great leadership with Roger Goodell, and I think we're going to fall victim to a lot of the things that Dr. Harry Edwards wrote about, with the pitfalls and the travesty of the black athlete, or in athletes in general, because it's a sad situation. But I think Dr. Harry Edwards can talk a little bit more about what's going on in the National Football League when it comes to concussion and the whole transition. I had a good friend of mine by the name of Junior Seau, who we came out together in 1990. He played about 20 years in the National Football League, and after his days was done, Probably back, probably about 3-4 months ago, he committed suicide. This was a guy that raised about $5 million for his community and gave back. I kind of compare the football to the tobacco industry. I remember as a little boy, my grandma was an avid smoker. My grandma smoked Virginia Slims. And I can never forget the ad that I used to read in Ebony magazine in 1978, where it said that the slogan was, "We come a long way, baby," in which we have, and in so many aspects. This is the 40th anniversary of Title IX, and women have come so far in sport, and blacks have come so far. But yes, when you get to that point, and then once the light go out in the stadium, you go back to those neighborhoods broke, unemployed. That's a travesty.
Thank you. Let me ask, Rich Michelson, you've written these books to children to try to get them interested and excited about hopefully a positive future. And you've done a lot about sports, about politics, about a whole host of issues. Are you doing anything that answers Dr. Edwards' plea that, are folks getting ready for the 21st century, or are we going backwards?
Well, I write for kids because, story is really how we communicate our dreams, our culture. It's how we pass things down to kids. You need to start early. I'm writing for kids 5, 6, 7, and that's how you build your society's foundation. You have to start with the kids. And the stories the kids hear are the stories they're going to grow up with. That's how they remember. That's how they know their history. If you ask a kid, what did you do today? They don't just say, well, I brushed my teeth, I combed my hair. They start telling you a story. They use a poet's wordplay. They use a novelist's tension line. They put it together. That's how they think. That's how they remember. So for me, what I'm trying to do is tell stories that will inspire, hopefully. I wrote a story about Renee Powell's dad, William. William Powell, when he built the first African-American golf course, I was there. He did this by hand. It is amazing. He went out with a mower, with a shovel. He was weeding by himself. Black people thought he was crazy, and white people thought worse. But he was out there every day. He was not looking to get wealthy, and he was not looking for you to know who he is. He was not looking for fame. He saw something that was wrong, and he just did it. In the middle of Ohio, totally because he needed to change something, because he felt in himself that something was wrong. That's what kids need to know. They need to know that no matter where they're growing up, and no matter who they are, they can make a difference. People like Martin Luther King didn't spring from nobody. He was standing on the shoulders of countless unknown people who made a difference, like William Powell. That history he took into himself. These are the stories kids need to know. I don't want to be like the third one in this panel to dump on Mike, as far as Jordan. But I always tell kids, you got to follow your dreams, but you also need to remember where you came from. So when I'm sitting next to my friend John Carlos, and he says sports was a platform for him to get his views across. That's why I'm writing about sports, because kids are drawn to sports. But this man, when he raised his fist, he put his career on the line. He basically had a higher purpose than the sports. I'm not a great sports guy. But sports is an avenue that kids will be interested in. But I'm amazed at this panel, because you've got people here who know the difference between sports as an end for itself and sports as a step on social justice. So when I'm writing for kids, I want to show them that there are other role models who are just out there because they try to make a difference and change things. And kids understand a lot more. People say, I'm a little worried, why are you talking to kids this young, 4, 5, 6, 7, about race issues? They got plenty of time to learn that themselves when they grow up. Man, do these people ever walk into a school? Kids every day are negotiating things a lot more complicated than any of us are, I guarantee you. They know what's right. They know who the cool kids are. They're trying to fit in. And they're trying to complicate all this stuff. By the time kids are 4 or 5, they know the difference between who they are and who someone else is. So what we got to teach them, and oftentimes you get a lot of teachers who are white are afraid to talk to the kids about race because they're afraid they're going to step on something or make a mistake. So I'm hoping that my books will serve as an introduction for them to raise the subject. And that's what we have to do because, sports is something, but, there's more important things. And this is why, if I just do one more quick side here, this is why it's so important that Obama gets reelected, folks. Because you're going to have judges. And, I don't know if a lot of you know, the great Frederick Douglass was a baseball player. Do you all know that? Did you know his son owned the Washington Generals in 1870s? Way before. Blacks and whites used to play baseball together. I don't want to start quoting with Harvard professors here, legal cases. But it's things like, Plessy versus Ferguson? Okay.
1896.
1896. That is when the doors closed. And blacks were cut out. It used to be, there were blacks playing with whites way before that, from the Civil War on. But the laws changed, and the doors closed. And if you think that the doors aren't going to continue to close if the Republicans are elected, we're all in trouble. So we'll do it.
I did not say that. Don't quote me tomorrow.
I said that. And 30 seconds. I just want to say, since I seem to be the representative of thin white Jewish guys on the panel, that I was watching that clip of Jesse Owens in the 36 Olympics, and I remember that on that team, on the relay team, there were 2 Jews.
Yep.
And Jesse Owens stood up, and Avery Brundage, who was basically a neo-Nazi, changed the time so that they wouldn't race. And Jesse Owens stood up and offered to refuse to race. Eventually, it was decided that it was best if he could, because somebody had to make that statement. And there was another man. He was willing to put politics, he was willing to put the future of things above just winning that race. And I think he's a great man for that.
Thank you very much. Professor Shropshire, let me ask you to sort of put this in context, if you can. We're celebrating this weekend, these days, remarkable championship athletes at every generation. And we have champions now. There's no question about that. And they're paid 100 times more than you guys were paid back in the day. I don't have to get into the money, but and yet there's this, and Dr. Harry Edwards talked about it. There's this false sense that all these athletes are doing well, when it's somebody that we rarely see who really is doing well. Right? We see folks on the basketball court, on the football field, on the baseball field, track, boxing. And financially, the one thing that we don't see is an economic interest for those folks who are doing well. And the folks who were champions didn't seem to care much about it. I know they cared about it, but what is it that hasn't led us to become owners as opposed to, I'm not going to use Bill Rhoden's term of slaves, but makes us athletes who are not really making decisions about the future of us? What's the problem?
I think broadly it is the economic system we're in, and as I said earlier, when the opportunities were there, when teams were affordable, And too, the other thing to think about, when they made more economic sense. I mean, you should understand, it really doesn't make sense, even if you have the money now, as an individual, to think about buying a sports franchise. The guys that bought the Dodgers, for example, I mean, imagine this. You have $2.1 billion that's just sitting and not earning much anyway because of the nature of the markets. So here's an asset. I can park this money somewhere else, and I can handle the cost to run the thing. So this is a place for me to place my monies. Now, some of us can think about that. Maybe some of you can think about buying a home on this island in that same sense. But $2.1 billion is the way that some people can think about it. So it's the athletes that are playing today. I mean, I think a positive thing to say in terms of some of the strategies that we might think about, and Dr. Edwards has taught me that we should try to think about the strategies for solutions rather than constantly kind of beating the situation up. Harry and Satch were instrumental in some of the early player transition programs, thinking about how do you get to players while they're in the league to think about what they can do afterwards. And George has been involved in these too. The problem and we've been running a program at Wharton for about 6 or 7 years now, that the problem that we have come to understand, two things. First, you're almost universally getting these guys too late, and second, the guys that come to these programs, because they're largely voluntary after the rookie programs, are self-selected, and they're the ones that are going to be okay anyway. So the guys, and it's largely guys that we don't get, are probably the guys that we just can't figure out how to reach. So one path that has come up is to think about more youth programs, to think about how do you talk to these kids at a younger age to get in their minds that the sports thing is a business as well, that you'll have a brief opportunity if you make it, in the NFL, about 3.5 years. You might have one great payday, and you won't be able to live at that level, so don't get accustomed to it. Take that money and find ways to invest it. And then also think about this too, athletes essentially, and George is one of the remarkable people in this world, you essentially die 2 deaths. I mean, you think about the idea that you have a career that ends, and you got to think at 22, 23, 24, worst cases, 35, 36, 37, what am I going to do the rest of my life? And it's a tremendous issue for someone who's been full focused on being successful on the athletic field. So we talked about plan A, plan B, plan C. So when you think about this whole idea, get to circle back to the idea of ownership, I mean, I think one of the last places to think about looking is to players, to think about the few that make money, enough money, and there are very few that have made enough money to think about this. Magic, I don't know how much Magic actually invested in the Dodgers. But for most other people, it is just not a great investment. I mean, the days of a sports franchise being a great investment, unless you just have that kind of money lying around, it's very difficult to say it's something that people should think about doing. So that again, I mean, and I don't mean to be the negative, let's get out of sports altogether person, because I do truly believe that the idea of using sports as a hook, because you can't shake it, is important. But the idea of using sports as the means to an end is the greatest aspiration we should all have. We should all try to be pro athletes. We should all try to own teams. We should all try to be GMs with teams. There's so many other areas that are so important.
Well, I want to take this a step further. I would go to Dr. Edwards and Dr. Carlos on this issue, which is the provocative question we've sort of left out. Why don't we just have a day of absence, or a week of absence, or a month of absence, or a year of absence in sports? I keep hearing people hinting, saying, we have too many people going the wrong way, they're going to get injured, they're going to become mentally ill, they're going to be disabled. All these things, I don't hear a whole lot of good coming out of sports. And I'm just trying to figure out, are we going to push this further, or are we what is the answer?
Well, I don't think that we can, well, I mean, if we have a day or a year or a week of absence, where are we going to go? What are we going to do? I mean, that becomes, I'm not sure I want a bunch of folks who would be playing football out on the block. I mean, You know, so I have, but I understand the gist of the question. I think the issue is not to get out, but to get better at what we're involved in. And this is what I meant when I said we have to teach our children how to dream with their eyes open, to be aware of what is happening. I was very moved by Wyoming's statement. I was very moved by the statements involving Joe at his gym, and the fact that they never got the recognition that they deserved, and that deprived not just them, it deprived the black community. What they were essentially doing was handicapping the race, because it is the powerful images, it's the role models, it is those who blaze the trails to show that it could be done that become important. So when they don't recognize us, they take that away from us. It's not an incentive for us not to continue to do it, but they take that away from us. I'm working on a project now with Dick Barnett on that 1956, 57, 58 basketball team from Tennessee State. This is a team that was told by the NIT, we don't play, Negro teams can't play with us. They were told by the NC2A, absolutely no way. So they went to the NAIA and they beat everybody that they played. Even the coach from that team is in the Basketball Hall of Fame as a contributor. Dean Smith took his four-corner strategy and all that from the coach at Tennessee State. Tennessee State's basketball team, this basketball team, the Harlem Globetrotters are in the Basketball Hall of Fame. But this team is not. And so we're working on getting that in. I think that the Tiger Bells should be similarly recognized for what they accomplished and achieved at that time. But it's all consistent. Bill Russell doesn't have a statue outside of Boston Gardens. And it wasn't even undertaken until the President of the United States said there should be one there. How can you have all kinds of people with statues outside, but the guys who is next to the word winning in the dictionary, there should be a picture of Bill Russell, because he is the greatest winner in team sports history. Go to Philadelphia. They got a damn statue of Rocky. The man who epitomized what Rocky was supposed to stand for coming out of Philadelphia was Joe Frazier. Right. There should be a picture of a statue of Smoking Joe right there, where they got a 5'5", 135 pounds, puffed up guy who acted like he was a heavyweight, and they put a statue to him in Philadelphia. We don't get the recognition because it's a way of handicapping the race. But that doesn't mean that we should not dream with our eyes open and recognize the greatness of the people who participated in these sports. And that's another reason why we should not just back out of it. The thing in professional football could bring an end to professional football. This is the greatest crisis in entrepreneurial football since World War II and that manpower shortage. The medical technology, which enabled us to get bigger, faster, stronger, while playing a sport, a collision sport, whose dimensions, the dimensions of the field, the basics of tackling and running and so forth have not changed since the 19th century. We're talking about a sport that is rooted in the 19th century, evolved and developed in the 20th century, and now we're trying to mesh it with 21st century understandings of what it means to take those hits, what it means to be essentially in a bus wreck every Sunday with somebody standing up in a striped shirt throwing a flag and penalizing you if you go through the windshield too early. I mean, we are going to have to come to grips with that, and now the safety involved in the game is right up against the very integrity of the game and what makes it football. But other sports are having similar kinds of difficulties. They come out with rules about what you can do in the paint. You can't block unless you're inside of this circle in basketball and so forth. The athletes have become so big and so good that there's some question whether these 19th and 20th century sports activities can really survive the 21st century in anything close to what we have come to understand as football or as basketball. And the African American future is directly tied up in that. One of the reasons we have persisted in football and basketball, these revenue-producing sports, is because of the collegiate athletic arms race. But the collegiate athletic arms race is ultimately unmanageable, unsustainable, and at some point it's going to become unconscionable. The schools are already raising hell about the amount of money that's going into collegiate athletics out of the general fund, out of student fees, and so forth. As they're closing science and English departments, coaches are getting $4 million contracts. Stadiums are being built with debt services that will go for the next 30 years that the school is going to have to meet. The 6 highest paid individuals on almost any Division I college campus are the athletic director, the head football coach, the defensive and offensive coordinator, the head basketball coach of men, and his assistant. So at the end of the day, as this thing begins to roll up, you're going to have super conferences which are essentially going to be semi-professional leagues, and you're going to have everybody else. And as those programs crash under the weight of the collegiate athletic arms race, black athletes who have benefited from the arms race with scholarships in football and basketball are going to find themselves being cut back and cut out as they go to what they call minorities sports of wrestling, water polo, diving, swimming, so forth, which blacks do not get scholarships in.
Thank you. I want to go to John Carlos, and I'm going to have a final question I want you folks to think about now as we're about to end, just a short response. So, 2 different questions. What's the significance of what's happened to Penn State? I want you to think about that in terms of politics, economic, and sports, number 1. And what's the significance of Gabby Douglas winning a gold medal in the Olympics? And yet, I shouldn't even say this publicly, but the first thing we saw on Twitter was black women talking about her hair. I'm not going to say nappy hair or leave it. I'm just trying to figure out how do we deal with these new things that are global news. Penn State and Gabby Douglas, who we invited to come here. But John Carlos, what's the sense? Do you expect folks to follow what you did, because you really were outside the box in terms of sports, right? There was always a message to what you were trying to do. It wasn't just being a great athlete, but it was being a person with dignity, which seemed to mean as much to you as winning the race.
Well, first of all, I think that fortunately for me, my mom and my dad was probably 2 of the greatest people in my life by far, because they had me to get in touch with the man in the mirror, find out who John Carlos was, or who he is. I think the biggest problem that we have as people of color or people that have good conscience, it's a very simple equation, and that is we are afraid to offend our oppressors. Simple as that. When it comes to issues concerning Gabby, when Gabby won all around, the first thing NBC do is throw this little monkey commercial on. It should have been black people and people of all ethnic groups that had the concern to say, I'm not afraid to offend my oppressor because this is wrong. They were allowed to do what they did to Tommy Smith and John Carlos and Peter Norman because people were afraid to offend their oppressors. I'm afraid if I step up, although I know it's wrong what they did, if I step up to state my claim that you're wrong, I'm afraid that they might tell me I don't have a job. Well, hell, you was looking for a job when you found that one. And until we start to wake up and realize that, as Harry said, the clock is running. The clock is running out. You know, I always go back to the Bible and say, God said the meek shall inherit the earth. The only thing God didn't tell you is how long you'll have it when you get it. We got to start moving now and stop being so afraid about what's going to happen to me in my life. Because it's not about my life. It's about my kids' life and their kids' life. You know, my father was in the First World War. Got 2 bullets. One in his jaw I thought about all the time. How you get that bullet, Pop? How you get that bullet, Pop? My father was getting ready to die. He never watched me run one track meet on TV or in person. I go to the hospital. Pop, how'd you get that bullet hole in your jaw? He said, well, son, help me out the bed. I go to help him out the bed, and he got this gurney on. I said, what are you doing, Pop? I asked you about the bullet hole. He said, well, I can't talk about this bullet hole until I talk about this bullet hole. Now, he had a bullet hole in his butt. Never knew it. I said, what happened? He said, well, son, you know, the First World War was segregated. He said, the only white man crossed into the black barracks was the commanding officer, captains, master sergeants. He said, and they was telling us to take this hill, take this hill. We always taking the hill. And I guess I'm so much like my father. My father talked to the commanding officer and said, well, we don't mind taking the hill, but why do we always take the hits and you standing here watching us get killed? How come you never take the hill with us? So his men told him, said, Earl, come on, let's just go do the job. So he went to do the job, and he said, as he's crawling up under the barbed wire and snow, he said he felt this blaze come through his butt, bam! But the enemy is in front of him. How did he get this bullet in the butt? And he said he realized that it was that commanding officer that shot him from behind. And I sat back and I said, well, Pop, how'd you feel? He said, right away I felt like the military wasn't for any black person, any person of color, because this nation has no regards for you. He said, I said that when I got shot. He said, but I didn't feel it until I got home. To realize that you putting your life on the line, you send your kids to put their life on the line, and you come home and you're still not respected enough that you can live where you want to live, or you can go to school where you want to go to school, or send your kids out to find decent jobs. And I got to thinking about how does drugs always seem to land on our neighborhood, and they can land a rocket on Mars 6 zillion million miles away and landing a half mile from where they say they're gonna land it. But if we can't stop the drugs and we can't stop cockroaches and rats and we can't stop starvation, and it all goes back to we are afraid to offend our oppressors.
Thank you very much. I want to end here, but I wanted to ask Wami Tyus if she would. It's still not clear what it was that made the women see what the men did in 1968 to, in a sense, dedicate your medals to them. What were you doing? What were you saying to John Carlos and Tommy Smith? What was the whole idea of we're here with you in 1968? What were you doing?
Well, when you think about 68, what John and Tommy did on their victory stand, that left no room actually for anybody else to make any type of statement to me. In that if we tried to do something, it was never going to top that, and it didn't need to be topped. We just needed more people feeling like that and doing those kinds of things. I think what I did or what our relay team did, a lot of other athletes did some type of similar protest, whether they wore their black shorts or they wore long black socks. So there were a lot of different protests that never got spoken of or said anything about. Even what our relay team did, we was trying to think of what we were going to do. What can we do? How can we show support? Because we were told they've been kicked out the village, they've been kicked out of Mexico City. And well, how could that be? How could that be? What did they do? So our thoughts were that, hey, this is the only thing we can do. This is to show them we do support you. We do believe in what you're saying. We know what's happening in the country. We are black women who has never got the credit that we should deserve, on the track or off the track, whatever it is. So we knew the struggle we knew the struggle. And when they did what they did on the victory stand, it was just not just for us, it was for everybody in this world. It was for equal rights for everyone, not for just black people.
Amen.
I want to
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to get back to a question that you asked initially that I think is so critically important. The thing about Penn State. People have the thing about Penn State as, well, you had this nest of degenerates and enablers, and this was just a tragic situation. This was a situation that was not only inevitable at some level, involving some ethical breach, if not criminal breach. It was one that was predictable. Penn State was at the very apex of Division I college sport. They got there through prevailing in the collegiate athletic arms race. When Joe Paterno came to that school, it had a 40,000 seat stadium. It now has a 110,000 seat stadium. They make $60 million a year off of football. The entire town is built around the football season as far as the businesses are concerned. What we have in collegiate football is a reflection of what we have in society. When I wrote my dissertation in 1970, I stated that sport inevitably recapitulates society. The character, the values, the human and institutional relationships, and the ideological rationalizations that justify those relationships. Sport reflects society. So when you see these corporate entities on Wall Street that are too big to fail, you have to understand that sports have become too big to derail. You had a situation at Penn State where you had the winningest coach, one of the biggest programs, one of the most profitable programs, and it simply became too big to derail. But we saw this one coming. We saw it at Ohio State, when Tressler knew that those kids were selling jersey and selling championship memorabilia in exchange for tattoos, for cars, and other kinds of things. But the NC2A didn't put them on probation until the following season because they had a bowl game. They had a big bowl game that would benefit them. They were too big to derail. Auburn University. They told Cam Newton's father that his punishment was he couldn't come to the championship game. But they didn't kick Cam Newton out of the championship game. The game was too big to derail. So what we had going at Penn State is a situation that got too big to derail, and nobody was willing to step up and say, there is something wrong with 15 years of abuse of children with the knowledge of an athletic department, especially one that is seen as the gold standard of behavior and so forth in collegiate athletics. But this is just the beginning. I will absolutely guarantee you that there are going to be other instances which are going to be too big, gotten too big to derail, and travesties, perhaps not this, but something else is going to occur. You can't have institutions such as this embedded in educational institutions and not have problems. At one time, they were worried about collegiate athletics dominating the campus, the tail wagging the dog. Well, now we're not talking about the athletic tail wagging the academic dog. We're talking about two separate dogs, and the athletic dog then turned out to be a Rottweiler as opposed to the Chihuahua of academics. So we're going to have other instances like this, and amazingly, the death penalty, which has been the NC2A's ultimate weapon, has essentially been taken off the table. If you're not going to give Penn State the death penalty, what are you going to do, give a school the death penalty because they gave a kid an extra t-shirt, or because he had lunch downtown on the alumni, or because they flew his mom in for a football game? No, they've taken the death penalty off the table. So the NC2A is going to become increasingly impotent in the face of this. They didn't have a rule to cover Cam Newton. They didn't have a rule to cover Penn State. They really didn't have a rule to cover Tressler at Ohio State because there was a bowl game that the whole conference was involved in. You get slotted where Ohio State finished, you played in that bowl. There was no exception, no options. So increasingly the NC2A is going to be impotent in the face of a collegiate athletic arms race that has become utterly unmanageable. That's what we're looking at Penn State, above and beyond the absolute ethical and moral criminal travesty of Jerry Sandusky and what happened to those kids.
Thank you very much. We want to thank this phenomenal panel. We want to thank those who are with us for the first panel as well.